Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'll explain the structure of Taurus. Taurus, like some of you may already know, is the sign of nutrition, of food. Its basis is Jupiter, exalted. Jupiter is space dilation. So as a space dilator, it rules stuff like the mouth, that obviously when you eat or when you speak, it dilates and restricts. And that's how you get sounds. And as I'll mention in a future video, insag is necessary for pronunciation of words. But its first domicile is actually its, also called Aries. We'll get on that maybe later. Which is the phagocytating uterine process as Earth itself. That's the opposite of Pluto. Pluto, hell, underground. It's Aries, Earth, emergence to light. Why is that? Because Pluto, in Scorpio also maximizes waste, is replaced by the aforementioned its, which instead maximizes output with the most minimal expenditure of energy, which is also works as the birthing process itself, growth. So how stuff grows, basically. This aspect of minimal expenditure of energy makes so that people attached to Taurus are non-existent laziness, because Tauruses work relentlessly but at low speed, low intensity, and their slowness, which derives from Jupiter, which is exalted by Saturn, which is the transparence you can see in the chart. This Jupiter being exalted by Saturn works much as like a black hole. And as you know, black holes, with their immense gravity, slow down time, or rather the acceleration of it, which is the Mercury fall you can see there, which also has other implications, like they can process an incredible amount of data. Tauruses don't process mentally. They process a little bit of data at a time, not an infinity. And a series of other things, like they don't like variation. They can be a bit conservative, not politically, not necessarily at least, but in their lifestyle. So, of course, I absolutely oblige people to acknowledge that all earth signs are work signs. Agriculture is no less of work than the artisanship of Virgo or the art factory works of the Capricorns. But since it's feminine, this sign got attached to its work ethic an infinity of prejudices on its mechanics. So Taurus, as I said, is the sign of food. Everybody knows that good food takes its darn long time to be made. But Taurus uses this formula for its life. The formula is consumption of matter equals feeling good, which is true. And Mercury, like Mercury fall is literal shit. So it's the part of matter that doesn't produce energy, hence it gets expelled by Scorpio. Because if obviously Taurus is the eating sign, Scorpio is the going to the bathroom sign. So, for comparison, if Aries says with his Mars and Pluto, I feel good by wanting and going towards that thing, Taurus says, I feel good by having and consuming that thing. Taurus doesn't say I desire. Taurus says I have, which is very different because we have Venus and It's Aries. Few people know how deeply Tauruses desire balance, like Libras, if not more, it depends. Why? Because there's Venus at the end. So if Libra starts already balanced, Tauruses want to achieve that balance. Venus, as the great harmonizer, because Venus is harmony, also works to balance the Taurian as much as it works to make them feel good. Like, it is very important for them for everything to be balanced in order to keep growing, of course, because that's what Jupiter wants. Taurus is considered greedy, and they do have the tendency to collect an incredible amount of useless trinkets. Like collectionism is Taurian. If you have a strong Taurian sector, you probably collect like something which is useless, like in a practical sense, it is useless. That's true. But the possessive nature of this materialist sign having money is much less about the power of or the sense of superiority in having it, unless we are talking about a Taurus first house, that case it absolutely is, and much more about the security of having healthy finances, bringing a certain sense of stability. You know, Venus as the second domicile that also forces not just the pleasure of having stuff, but also the healthiness of what is possessed. You will find this is very interesting. I found this very interesting personally. That Taurus does not only want to feel good itself, it wants the things it's consuming, which is also their loved ones, its possessions to feel good as well. So, loved ones, plants, cattle, which is the Taurus itself, and obviously food to be healthy, protected, taken care of. Like you see all those like farms, they're really taken care of. They're not just, at least the Taurian type, the ancient type, the more natural type, not the fertilized by Uranian powers type. They're really taken care of. All the cattle is also taken care of. You know, the sign also refuses any type of stuff that isn't natural, but I'll talk about that later. Venus is also the planet of health. You can think of the human body as a big, complex machine made of many parts that only works if all the parts are harmonious. And well, that harmony is Venus. So it's the balance between all body parts, which are their own machines, of course. The easiest ways to understand Taurus is to envision Taurus as a plant. Let's break it down. So the domicile of it makes sure the plant is born, emerges to the sun, on Earth, and is well fed by the same underground it's radicating on. Pluto exile. Pluto is the underground where you get your minerals, your nutrition, even water, because plants don't absorb water directly, they just get it from underground. Of course, so it uses this exile to get its absorption, because it absorbs. That's what it does. It's a uterine process. And the sun, which is also exiled by transparence, is also the light that is literally absorbed by the sign Taurus. Hence is consumed, both are consumed. And the Saturn transparent, as this plant gets its nutrition, Saturn transparent gives it solidity. So again, talking about structure and also its limitation, because if you're contained by a structure, you are also limited. So the plant can't grow eternally, which is very important. because it's paired with Jupiter, and Jupiter wants everything in exaltation, especially to expand the turn and occupy everything, which it can do in the sign. It's gonna do it there in Sag and Pisces, but in Taurus, it's limited by Saturn, which brings it a limit. So like, you don't see plants growing infinitely into the sky, for example, or like the human body can just accumulate fat infinitely until it starts breaking down itself. But the Saturn transparence is literally the log of the plant, its wood, its solidity. But since it's itself Jupiter also, is also the cyclicality of its nutrition and expansion, you know. Saturn rules agricultural cycles. It's the harvest times, you know. It's also Taurus, opposition with Scorpio, makes them fear anything small. The end of growth, because Mercury as the kid, also Mercury is the child, is the child is the absorbs energies, the resources, they need to be fed, they need to be paid for. It signifies the end of the parents in a sense, and so the end of growth, the scarcity of resources, the waste, the withering of plants. Here we move from the tribal hunter-gatherers of Aries to the farming settlements of the Fertile Crescent. So Babylon, Mesopotamia, Egypt, etc., which not too much people know, started out as city-states, not as big empires. And some of them even died as such, like city of Knossos in Crete, which literally has Tyrian symbology on its like courts, walls, etc. It uses a non-patriarchal government system, or at least a bit less than the usual. They dress with light clothing, loose, sensual, both men and women. They were peaceful and extremely military weak. If not for the walls, like for example, like the myth of Troy, with this infinitely strong, impenetrable walls being broken down by the stratagem of Scorpio, but they themselves are quite weak. So much of those civilizations were wiped out by the people of the sea, which is the next sign, Gemini Sag, but that's another story. And an era of farming, this was an era of farming so excessive, Mesopotamia will lose a lot of fertility in favor of the northern parts of it, which favor the near like Nazi-like empire of Assyria, which wiped out Babylon, etc. That's a long story, and then you get the universal empire of Persia, but that's another story. For biblical stories instead, I've chosen this one. Samson. Samson, what to say about this? Hair, literal hair, this, you can see this, is ruled by it's like a forest. It's also like the more like wild feminine, which is not Venus. Venus is very civilized. And it represents this untamed feminine power of proliferation. Hair, for religious roles, is always too big cut. Like a lot of priesthood, historically, cuts their priests' hair. Unless we're talking about Babylonians and other very Taurian feminine civilizations. Its removal would imply a renounce to beauty. So it's like a form of feminine castration, which Samson, the Taurus, this big and muscular guy, which probably got like Mars in Aries or something like this, but is very clearly a Taurus sun, gets seduced by the Philistine Dalila, Scorpio, for money and power. So first of all, It is of the utmost importance to acknowledge the Taurus birth tribe against the Scorpio hidden force of seduction, eroticism, and lies. I mean, she made him fall asleep on her lap. For the data, which is Mercury, of his strength, Mercury is obviously data, which he eventually revealed, and the secret was that his hair was his source of strength. So she cuts his hair, he loses all the strength, is chained and made blind by the Philistines, and brought to like a Philistine palace or a temple, something like that. And as his hair regrows, he grabs a pillar and screams, "Death to Samson and all the Philistines," which is a very strong signification of how the lack of Saturn, the structure, those pillars, is deadly and it collapses. And so it kills them. Also, in a very interesting twist of order, masculinity got associated with it a lot of associated the cutting of hair, so very short hair. The crew cut is very used in the military, and even heads, which are not natural. I mean, I have a sort of a crew cut, you can see, because I have a Capricorn ascendant which does that. Other myths we can explore biblically. Obviously, the more famous, simple one is the golden idol. So the Jews, as they got out of Egypt from their exodus, made this image of a cow or a cattle, something golden like that, you get it? Which is this image of excessive materialism, of associating wealth with literal worshipping of the matter, which is literally the reason they got enslaved in Egypt, because Judea had problems with a famine. They didn't have enough food, so long story short, they immigrated to Egypt, where there was no famine ever because there's the Nile, which brings abundance. And basically, they got enslaved eventually. But basically, this golden cow, this golden cattle, is replaced by the manna, which is the daily bread that God brings from the sky, which is fate, a form of fate itself, of this Jupiter, abundant God that brings wealth, not wealth, but like daily bread, survival, feeding, that thing. Or another mythology we can observe is the one of the Minotaur, but this one is so obvious, I am gonna honestly skip. So, Taurus. Taurus is the kid that can crawl. It touches, it smells, it licks absolutely every object and feels viscerally the existence of matter. Stops being fed by the miraculous breast milk and starts tasting actual food, learns to walk. Then we have the communication in Gemini, but that's the other sign, next sign. An interesting thing is that how Taurus feels the totality, the matter. Scorpios feel a hollowness of matter. They feel like every time they touch something, the thing they touch might actually be hollow inside. It's very scary. Hence the skull association, hence the skull as a mask of the soul, where there's nothing hidden. There's nothing inside of the skull, which is very scary, but we'll get onto that during Scorpio. What does Scorpio rule? Scorpio rules the mouth, the eyes, and the nose, so the face, well, for the most part. Interesting part that Lisa Morpurga makes is that the eyes, so Jupiter, and the Mercury exile. So Mercury is earring, rules earring too, the ears, the ears. Make the Taurians use earring similar to how they use eyes. So they do it in a very superficial way. Well, so they search for beauty, what they like. So they only listen to what they like, already agree with, instead of depth, which depends on their Mercury actually, but they tend to do this. So it makes them very deaf, at least unconsciously, and then they blame others for having said something else they misunderstood or they never said it. It's annoying, but they do this. You can obviously associate this with the big wooden horse of Troy that was presented as a gift for the Trojans, but actually was a scam. And Cassandra, she warned the Trojans that the horse would bring the end of Troy, and nobody listened to it because we wouldn't accept a gift, right? So they got scammed by Mercury. Other aspects are that they exude extremely, every one of them exudes sensuality, which is a passive force opposed to Scorpionic eroticism of depth and intensity, of trying everything. And they want everything to be done as nature wants. So sometimes they go for ideologies such as the Unabomber and like the general return to monkey, primordialism, etc. They prefer, and the sign itself rules wood and polished stone, clay, and other natural materials you can think of. And they usually say, fuck GMOs in any food. I don't want my food to have weird chemicals. I want everything to be all natural and organic. Which is good, of course, for the health. Like, that's obvious. Taurus also rules medicine. Another point in this, the same thing as the work thing. Every earth sign rules medicine. They do different type of medicine, but they do rule it. And it was forcefully removed from them. They rule, obviously, like physiotherapists. They can be physiotherapists. Insert its body part as external, so like obviously anything like dietologist, optic. So like I don't know. So they rule the healing eyes, etc. Dentists, and which is obviously extremely important. Although it's not your preventive Virgo or Pharma, the alchemist, the pill that heals everything, or your Capricorn surgeon with enough coldness, Uranus, to prosper to do those incredible operations to your body. Other Taurian significations are anything regarding food, photography, not cinematography. This is very important because cinema is more illusionary in nature, and it's ruled by Pisces, which has this active vision, seeing too, with the Jupiter, but is not the same, or making perfumes. In conclusion, these people tend to be slow moving, unless they have a Mars in Gemini or Mars in Aries, then it's more complex, but they tend to be slow, conservative, extremely reliable. They will never really betray you or abandon you. They are probably way more eccentric than any other sign, even more than you Virgos, even more than you Scorpios. Sounds weird, it absolutely is. When they like something, they like it that way. Everybody else who doesn't like it has bad taste. Who gives a fuck, right? But aspect of this, like for example, Salvador Dali, a Taurus, is the father of surrealism. We would have to do a whole chart analysis, but basically it was very eccentric. You can see it in his life, in his art, etc. I love his art, personally. Tauruses won't ever betray you. Unless you betray them, then they will hold a grudge for life. Which makes sense. They make for lifelong partners or friends. They can keep with time. They don't really get bored. They don't stay like, oh, you're just part of my previous phase. I'm bored. Get out. They don't do that. Like other signs might, like Aries, be like, oh, I desire this thing. I go with you because we desire the same thing and we submit to this desire. Tauruses don't really do that. Tauruses keep going with you. And another very important aspect is that their necessity-based nature, because obviously you need food constantly to survive, transfers matter into value. So it's not just mere hedonism, as it may have seemed, but they're also extremely generous. They rarely bring trouble, however, they are not excessive people. They prefer the daylight over the night. Obviously, Scorpios do the opposite. And every Taurus wants to live like it's Sunday afternoon forever. So with this final phrase, I leave you. See you another time. Bye.